Today's topic is Hocus Focus. I'm Christy, here with my good friend Joni. And of course, we're here to talk about what we want and also to talk about action. Those are our two main premises of doing this live stream, is to move us toward what we want. But how do we get to what we want? We start off with what we don't want, which is what we're seeing every week with this administration. Keeping it timely, what happened in the last week? You've probably heard about what happened at Delaney Hall, where the conditions were so poor in the facility that people went on a hunger strike. And then members of the public went there to protest. And it was reframed as them rioting. And there was so much misdirection. And Senator Kim, who's a really outspoken advocate for people, got pepper sprayed, and it's on camera. So this is sort of the context in which the hocus focus point is being made. They're using like hocus pocus mechanisms to like, oh, magical thinking, and we're going to say this didn't happen. It really was something else. Oh no, just like January 6th was supposedly a day of love. Like this is the lies again. We talked about this in our previous series. And then our focus, like we, by focusing and just repeating and repeating and repeating what's true, what is ethical, what is reasonable, what is aligned, by just being this broken record, we can make a difference because we're seeing it everywhere where people, when they object, whether it's through the court system or it's in the court of public opinion, things are shifting. So this is kind of where we're kicking off our hocus focus. And I just want to turn it over to Joni to talk about, I don't know, words, for example. There's something we talked about before we started, how important the use of words are in all of this.
Yes, and the inhumane treatment, which it's inhumane. And I heard someone talking about it, saying the humans in Delaney Hall. And I thought, that is perfect. That is what we should be saying. Don't say immigrants. Don't say humans. These are human beings that are being treated inhumanely. That the food was rotten and molding, and that they're not getting enough food. Yeah, wormy, and the guards are being vicious with them, and the children and others with medical needs aren't being attended to. And that is not what we want. We want humane treatment. We want the humans in the care, well, wherever they are, but especially in the care of the government, where our tax dollars are going to this private entity that is managing these facilities. Billions of dollars that came from our hard work going to these private companies to treat people poorly. Not just poorly, horrendously. Human beings.
Yes, and I think that is such a big part of the strategy, is to dehumanize certain sectors of the population, whether it's Haitian immigrants, whether it's people simply of the color of their skin, whether it's someone opposing whatever the regime currently wants. If we say those are non-humans, then we can treat them non-humanely, as it should be, because they're not humans based on their premise, then that really prevents us from treating everyone with care, treating everyone with respect. Even I think probably prisons are better than this, that they at least have a minimum standard and people are allowed to go visit and see what the conditions are like. Here, it's nearly impossible to get in. And when they do, and they see the conditions are appalling, it doesn't seem like that actually changes things. It seems like, yeah, so we got this. So this is where this continued focus of like, this is not okay. This is not okay. We can continue to bring forward. We want them to be treated humanely. They're humans, as Joni said.
And notice the words too, that the more that people talk about others as cockroaches or rats or anything that there is this connotation that they are not human, that they are something to be squashed, something to be eradicated, that's intentional. And what we can do, because we're trying to be about action here, what we can do is to redirect that. When you hear that, mentally, if you're not in front of the person saying it, mentally redirect it to human beings. Those human beings who may have done something we disagree with, human beings who may believe something we disagree with, human beings. And if you are in front of someone who is saying something like that, redirect them if it's safe for you to do so. Humans.
And again, that's the focus. We have the ability to redirect what we think, what we say, what we share. I early on when all this was starting and people were like putting up these, oh my gosh, this is happening, and they would share it with everyone, and I would see it and I would, oh, like that brings me into despair. Also being careful to not share things. Just like Heather Cox Richardson for the longest time would not say the name of the concentration camp in Florida that had the cutesy name, because it is not cute. It's not cute at all. She did mention it a couple times this week by its name or its cutesy name. But we can decide what we share and whether we say there was a reference in here to them, these human beings, referring to them as a certain type of animal. I'm not going to repeat what they said, but these are human beings. These are human beings. These are human beings. Because I think our brains also go, ooh, rats, ooh, cockroaches. Oh, they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Like we have this way of our brains like noticing something that's remarkable. And sadly, what's remarkable now is that these are human beings. Like, oh, right, these are human beings. Maybe we should name this episode Human Beings. But it is bringing back the focus to what we want and how we want it, and what we do in order to do that. And I'm sure, and mentioned in the comments, Richard says, encouraging self-deportation. Like if it's awful enough in these places, they maybe think, oh gosh, get me out of here. Anything's better than this, which may or may not be true, particularly depending on where they send people. If you send a human being to the Congo where they have the Ebola virus going on, or other places where the US has warned Americans not to go, maybe it isn't worse. They're both horrible. Neither one is appropriate for a human. So,
yeah. And the sense of trying to get these humans who the government wants out of the country in any way possible. Doesn't seem to matter whether they die in these private prisons.
I was thinking the same thing.
And what I heard recently was that there could be, we don't know necessarily, but there could be some intentionality of not providing enough food to eat. That if you don't provide enough calories, then there is starvation, there's the things that the body does when you don't have enough food and clean water, that it could be up to 100 or hundreds of people sharing the same toilet, because some of these detention facilities, prisons, concentration
camps, exactly.
camps were built out of warehouses where the plumbing isn't necessarily where there's like in a prison where there is a toilet in every cell. So there's all of this sense of, we have this sense of outrage over this, but we're getting redirected away from it. And the focus is, okay, we don't want to see these people as other. We don't want to otherize them. That's why we're saying, call them human beings. But we also don't want to allow ourselves to fall into the trap of, yeah, but that uh, that the other side does this. What about ism? Well, you say this is bad. Well, what about this? And that's where, when Christy started talking about hocus focus, that's the focus. Focus. Don't get drawn into what about this? Because honestly, it's not a partisan issue. If someone did something wrong, it's wrong. This is human versus inhumane. This is ethical versus unethical. This is grift versus taking care of the public's interest. So not partisan.
And Ben makes a great point. I mean, a lot of this has to be illegal. Like, I'm sure it's illegal to detain humans and treat them inhumanely. Like, this is not the Dark Ages, people. This is modern times. We have laws and such that say you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. That's why some oversight is necessary, because people tend to, cut corners or whatever. And in this case, outright cruelty and they'll deviate from what is legal. And the legal system is notoriously slow, and the legal system can't initiate its own cases. Someone has to bring a case forward, then it has to go through the system. Someone could be starving for weeks by the time something gets done, and there's a ruling and something has to happen. So again, focusing on what we want them to follow the law. And part of our activism, which can be on a protest poster, can be writing letters, can be, you know, organizing in your community, is to say, this is what we want. This is what we expect. This is how we want to be in the world. And this is how we want our taxes, our money spent. I do not want to support inhumane treatment of human beings under any circumstance. I mean, maybe that's like, duh, obviously. But somehow, if enough of us keep saying it, surely someone will get the message. And I'm going to just deviate for a second. If anyone knows me, they know I practice the ancient healing out of Jin Shin Jitsu. Your middle finger has to do with anger. Anger's about, we don't want this. You can hold your middle finger to harmonize, bring things down to a manageable level to allow you to take conscious action toward whatever you do want. So if you are in the middle of this going, you can always hold either one of your middle fingers to help you calm down your nervous system, and then go do something, whatever it is you can do. This last weekend, I went out and protested again. We only have 2 more weeks, well, 1 more week now, because it's going to get too hot here. And I got myself an unpaid protester button because I'm an unpaid protester. And I just think, like, the more of us unpaid protesters that organize and come forward and go, this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what we want. Are you hearing us? Ding, ding, ding. Then eventually we're gonna wear them down.
Well, and that's it's at a micro level and a macro level. We want, after all of this comes crashing down, because it's going to, we want a world where everyone is treated humanely, that the rules that we have in place and more, that there are things in place so that this never happens again. And there are, yes, this is illegal, and yet this administration, and words matter, I have for
Regime.
several years not used the president's name. I say, he who shall not be named. And that's very intentional, because names have power, words have power. Now I've lost my point. Where was I going, Christy?
Let me call on my mind reading hat. I'm not exactly sure, but I would like to circle back around, and maybe this will prompt you back to it, to the whataboutism aspect of this, because our brains have an amazing way of rationalizing things. And so instead of connecting, and I'm talking about the people that are sort of desensitized to all this, instead of looking at this and saying, wow, there's actually human beings in there, and I don't think anyone should be treated like that. Instead, they sort of seem to put up something protective of themselves, and they go, "Well, Biden was the one that made the permeable border, and what about Biden doing blah 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 blah?" Like, we're not talking about the past. We're talking about the present. The border was more leaky, so to speak, because our economy was so good and it was not going well in other countries during the pandemic. Of course, people were like, get me out of here. I'm going somewhere where it's better. My family's starving. I need a better livelihood. Like, this is not relevant. Now, we can go down and argue each one of those specific points when someone does something like that, or we can simply be the broken record. Now, if any of you are too young to remember what a record is, a broken record was when the needle got stuck and it just kept repeating the same thing over and over. I don't know if that happens digitally, but to just be relentless in your focus of repeating and repeating and repeating so that it becomes almost a monotony, almost like the subliminal messaging because it just keeps happening and happening and happening versus the engaging in an argument. And I'm going to show you, and I'm going to points 1 through 3. And someone on my Facebook page actually rebutted something that I don't do that much political on my Facebook page, but I had something where I'm like, if you guys are okay with this slush fund, this is from last week, please watch this video where Liz Oyer lawyer, did a piece talking about how awful this was. And someone on my page was like, nah, like, you're not getting this exactly right. And she gave me all these news articles and so on, but from sources that are utterly not trustworthy anymore. CBS News, Grok. Who does Grok? That would be Elon Musk. And I just responded with, if anyone wants to read more about this, here is an article from Heather Cox Richardson talking about, one of her newsletters talking about this particular thing, and then all of her references in the bottom. And that ended the conversation, which I was happy with, because it's like, if you really want to know, here's a good source. And just redirecting people to, something that's valid and reasonable and validated and factual, not made up stuff.
Well, and that's an important point. What you did was beautiful because you weren't going to change that person's mind. But what you did was give the bystanders, the people who are watching that conversation, other data. And it may be that it's planting a seed in them. And we've talked so often about we don't know the impact that we have. But as long as we remain calm and factual and with a sense of love that we want humanity to thrive, we want people to be treated well. And when we do that, we have more impact on the people that are watching. And we don't know the kind of impact that we have. But that is a way to combat that.
And also then you don't like get in a vicious fight and I'm like thinking piranhas. Wow. You haven't jumped in and started like engaging and like, no, and I'm gonna be the one who's the victor. I'm gonna dominate here. I'm gonna show you. It's more like, well, this is what I believe. And I don't want to debate at length. I didn't even say anything like that. I just said, if you want more information, just look at this article, look at this newsletter. And people did notice. People responded to the newsletter saying, they did not, interestingly, respond at all to her comments. They did not put any likes or frowns or anything, zero, but they did respond to my response to her, which was the Heather Cox Richardson thing. And it's so interesting as we're having this conversation, human is inhumanity, and inhumane is something I tend to think of being like unusual. Like most people, maybe they're occasionally unkind but inhumane takes it to a whole nother level. That is completely beyond anything that I ever thought we would witness in our lifetimes, at least in our country. Like we hear of that elsewhere. We don't hear of that here. And so to reclaim what it means to be a US citizen, what it means to be someone who lives in the United States of America, I think is largely what we're up to here. And we've said before, both Joni and I are optimists. Like we can see the potential. We can see what's good. We want to move towards love. And inhumane is the direct opposite of love. And it's rooted, of course, in fear because somehow they're fearing losing their power. They're fear of somehow not being able to dominate and not being able to control. And love is the powerful antidote to fear. So we could like wash this all with tons of love. I'm of course just like, oh, love. And as a doing nothing while loving is not going to change anything. But combining love with action, oh, that is the magic recipe, in my opinion.
Well, and the dominate thing is important too, because what you did in that Facebook exchange was not try to dominate. You tried to inform. You tried to share your perspective in a way that was loving and not calling the other person names that has gotten normalized, unfortunately. It was crazy. Um, but the point I remembered from earlier was about the UN, that the things that Christy just talked about, that what we want, that what we thought we would see as in this country, humane treatment, is also codified in UN charters that the US is now kind of really extremely violating. And that we are voting on the side of countries that do these kinds of horrible things. It's unfortunate. But when you go back to the whataboutism, one way to combat that is that redirecting again. Just throwing in the Epstein files. It's, what about this person being bad? It's like, I don't care. If there were people who were, just get to the truth, let the light shine in there, and anyone who hurt other people, regardless of their political party, I don't care about that. I care about the ethical situation. I care about justice.
And the humans that were harmed.
Humans.
Because this is not abstract. Like these guys did these things and they didn't really harm anybody that much. These people, they're largely women, these young women's lives were altered forever. Forever. And for the perpetrator, it may have been that brief moment of time where they got to have what they wanted. But for these other women, humans, it will stay with them forever. So the idea that we can do things that are just whatever, like we can just get away with whatever we want, is so antithetical to being a loving, committed to justice kind of society. And hooray, I mean, I don't love everything about Thomas Massie, but I so admire him for his persistence on the Epstein files because he's showing what, like a real human and humane side of himself.
Yeah.
And we're not going to agree with everyone on everything, but when we can come together, let's leverage that and, admire that and celebrate that and wish them well. Like, I'm sure he's also getting death threats. This is the craziness of this whole thing, like Bill Cassidy putting himself on the line saying, oh, we're going to have Kennedy confirmed, even though we know he has no medical or science background. He sold his soul, and then he gets primaried out because of a little bit of disagreement with Trump. It's really a bizarre and fascinating time how any deviation is they attempt to squash. We are getting louder because they are getting crazier.
Well, and the one thing that you're talking about, Massie,
holding my middle finger, people.
if we act in a way that's within our integrity, then we can live with ourselves. Now, Thomas Massie can probably live with himself because he was acting with integrity in this area. And maybe he's rethinking some of his other positions. Maybe he isn't. But as Christy said, we don't have to agree with everyone about everything, but we have to act with integrity, and we have to want. I can't tell you what to want, but Christy and I want this world where there is love, that we do care about each other, where we want everyone to thrive. And whatever we can do to help make that world possible, we can do. Whether it's responding to a Facebook comment in a way that is not confrontational, but lets others know that there's a different way of looking at it. Whether it's reframing, redirecting to humans being inside these concentration camps, whether it's redirecting on any of these other issues, so that it is not Democrat versus Republican. It is ethical versus unethical. It is humane versus inhumane.
And this is what's interesting about this time, is there's a real lack of subtlety. The corruption is so blatant, the abuse of human rights is so blatant, the law breaking, sinking boats in the Caribbean with no evidence that they've done anything. I think they're doing it in the Pacific now as well. Like this incessant desire to just do whatever they want makes it so in your face. and that's the good that's the good news from the perspective of it's getting so obvious that it's really hard for those whataboutisms to go, oh, but what about, like Strait of Hormuz? Well, what about, because we had a good agreement before. And he was like, well, it's not my agreement. I'm going to throw that away. I'm like, well, what would you even say in response to that? Although I've heard some crazy responses to some other things where I just kind of like, what? That's really what you're going to come back with? That's kind of crazy. So I'm not happy about what's going on, but I am glad that people are potentially, and probably based on the approval ratings, becoming more and more awake and aware of what's humane and what isn't, what's ethical and what isn't, what's going on that is in our best interest and what isn't. I mean, so much of what has happened to allow MAGA to become this tiny group of people, relatively speaking, that have such power is fear. It's the fear that they are using to create conspiracy theories, from chemtrails to vaccines to election interference or election denial. Like the fear machine is really easy to rev up and gear and get moving. And to come from the other side and be the ones who say, wait, there's a better way. And we don't have to freak out, and we don't have to lose our grounding. We can stay here grounded and embodied and aware and practical and take logical steps forward to create the world we want to see, which does not include, oh my God, a plane just flew over. Oh my God, they're vaccinating people so they can stay well. Like it is a brave new world when we can soothe our fears and come from a place of logic and love. I think somehow those two, I've never linked them before, but I do think they are linked from the perspective of, if you are in fear, your ability to be logical gets undermined. And you're going to believe things just because it's reassuring to believe something, even if it's false.
Well, and as Christy mentioned earlier, people are very good about putting up barriers so that they don't have to change, and that they don't have to see that what they might have believed is harmful. And that's human. It's a very human thing to do. And this less confrontational approach of just redirecting, not trying to engage in the whataboutism, but redirect back to not just facts, but back to what we want to see. We want to see humans. We want this humane treatment. We want to see the light come in so that there is justice, that every person gets treated as the unique soul that they are. And we want this wrapped in a fierce love that cares for others.
And how would we want to be treated? And how would we want our family members to be treated? And how would we want members of our community to be treated? This is what we want for all humans, whether they are in concentration camps, in other countries, whatever. Like, this is what we want. We want everyone to be treated in a wonderfully open-hearted, respectful way, no matter what they've done or haven't done.
Yes. And with that, let's turn love into action together.
Together. See you
Thanks,
next time,
all.
everyone.